But I implore you tonight to open your minds. It's never too late for that. My grandfather was 94 years old when he set off around the world. Admittedly, it was in the form of smoke. Recently, my grandfather died after a long battle with my grandmother. Music is in the family. My cousin is a piano soloist. Sorry, piano soloist. There's my mother at the door. She was always helping people. She was a can-do person, half Canadian, half Hindu. Very dull curries. I remember her singing me to sleep, la la la, la la la, la 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 la. She was French-Canadian. I had it translated years later. Apparently it means the. In truth, no one really knew who my father was, which made conversations with him at the dinner table very awkward indeed. He was a small, bright man. I remember the time I accidentally found him at work on the other side of the road. I stopped. When he saw me, he pretended to walk away. When I saw him, he completely disappeared. I was crushed. Upstairs on the landing, there's the wardrobe I remember getting into as a child and finding a door at the back that took me to a strange new world where my neighbour was sitting in the bath. On the other side, there's a window into the garden. I remember writing my name in the snow with my grandfather until I got tired of holding him upside down. His nose got frostbite. See, my parents, they knew lots of musicians. I remember being on holiday with John Lennon and getting to the edge of Cornwall and turning to him and saying, "Imagine there's no Devon." Do you know, not long after that, he wrote the song. Help. It was around about that time I had a moment of realization that my mother might actually be Yoko. Oh, no, she isn't. Then I'd invite my Uncle Eric, because when he comes round, he always brings an expensive or exotic gift from a different part of the world, because he's a baggage handler. Although he always wanted to be a TV detective. Oh, yes. In fact, he's retiring from the airport quite soon. I should encourage him to, go back for one last case. But I don't think I've ever been so scared as I was at school, waiting to play cricket, holding my bat, practicing strokes in the mirror so that when I pretended to have one, someone would definitely call an ambulance. But in the end, my whole educational experience was entirely worthwhile, because years later in the high street, I met one of my old teachers, and by this time he was working at a sewage plant, and it was his job to watch the clocks and the dials to make sure the sewage has been treated at the right speed. Then he apologized for such a long and boring explanation, but I said, "Don't worry, it's your own waste, your timing." And he said, "I suppose you thought that was funny." And I said, "Well, I think we've just had an appointment with destiny." He said, "I used to teach a boy who was called Des Tiny." And I said, "So you were a master of your own Des Tiny?" And he punched me in the face. Occasionally I have done what my Uncle Kevin would have wanted, turn a bad situation into a good situation. Like recently, I mixed up the muesli with one of our relatives' ashes. But I correctly renamed the container granola. I had a dream about my grandmother the other day. She was showing me something that was both a Venn diagram and a pie chart. FP, that was fish pie, not cooked properly, covered with purple cat hair. As soon as I found out the other one was American pie, I knew that the intersection had to be, "This'll be the day that I die." When my grandfather died, it was spooky. The kitchen clock stopped the moment it dropped on his head. We knew things weren't right. A few months before, I bought him one of those Fitbits, but he just sat on the sofa all afternoon. Apparently he thought that's how many steps he had left. My other grandfather lived in pathological fear of the number 99. He wouldn't get on a 99 bus. He wouldn't live in a house that was number 99. I thought it was all a bit superstitious. But to be fair to him, in the end, he choked on a flake in an ice cream. Apparently, my great-grandfather's only regret on his deathbed was spilling a jug of water on his electric blanket. This is my job. My brother's a doctor. So eventually, my Uncle Kevin got out of prison in the end by giving £250 to the Pope, who was in the cell next to him for bribery and identity theft. Uncle Kevin. My other grandfather got a metal plaque on his forehead dedicated to a park bench that died. My other grandfather is a bit of a man for the ladies. Yeah, it doesn't matter how clearly the gents are signposted. My other grandfather, sometimes I wonder what he would think about what I do. He spent his whole life in the kebab business and was buried with all his equipment. He's probably turning in his grave. My other grandfather, it's always going on about how during the war people could leave their front doors open, which is probably why his submarine sank. My other grandfather, he was a bank robber. The trouble is the rest of the family are all police marksmen. Died quite recently. Surrounded by his family. My other grandfather broke into a school recently and shouted, "If it wasn't for me, you'd all be speaking German." "That's right," said the German teacher. Thanks for coming out tonight. I'll leave you with this. I remember years ago being at my grandparents' house, and on the table there was a chocolate cake. My grandfather looked over at me and he said, "Go on, no one's looking." I said, "What, really?" He said, "Go on, no one's looking." So I got up and I punched Grandma.